all of that was silly, ridiculous, a waste of time. They didn't want that's why they were so successful. That's why they got away from it.
I'm surprised they didn't go bigger, but they probably
I've made a living in Ferriday.
Which all come together.
Dianne Andrews in black and white. Welcome to Dianne Andrews in black and white, and I'm your host, Dianne Andrews. Thanks for being with us today, whether you're in the 3 million homes in Louisiana and part of Mississippi, or whether you're watching us on YouTube or Vimeo. As you see, my hair is blowing and you hear a lot of traffic, because this is a show I'm doing on location in Ferriday, Louisiana, as part of my series on the Silver Dollar Group. And people who keep up with Dianne Andrews in black and white have seen some of the shows already. One reason that we're here, this is hallowed ground. This is where you've heard us talk about Mr. Frank Morris, the only shoe shop maker and repairer in the Ferriday, Harrisburg, Vidalia area for 10 to 15 miles around. He happened to be a black man, but his customers were black and white. And December 10th, 1964, he was burned down inside this shop. He was burned down and he was killed and burned to death. Now I have here with me Mr. Stanley Nelson, who wrote the book Devil's Walking. And in that book, he chronicles the death of Mr. Frank Morris. And we are here today outside, and you will hear some noise, but this is a very important feature to see. It just looks like a slab, but to the people in this area, it's much more than just a slab. Stanley, thanks for being here with me again today. So tell us about what happened here on December 10th, 1964.
So on December 10th, it was the shortly after midnight. Frank Morris was in the back room of his shop, and that back room is right over here behind me. Mm-hmm. And as he sometimes after midnight, he's hearing glass breaking. He gets up out of his bed to see what's going on. He comes and he has to turn this way, as the shape of the shop is, and he turns into the shoe shop area. And as he looks straight ahead, he can see one man that's holding a gasoline can. And he sees another man with a shotgun. And so he walks up to where they are and he shouts, "What are you doing? Stop that." And about that time, one of those two men strikes a match, throws it through the broken window. It lands inside the shop as Frank's moving toward the front door. As soon as that match hits the fumes inside this building, it just explodes in flames. And as Frank gets to the front door, the man with a shotgun takes that gun, points it right at Frank's head and says, "Get back in the shop." So to get out of the building, Frank had to turn around and go back, retrace his steps, and he had to come out a side door of that shop. And he made his way around to this empty lot over here where two Ferriday police officers pulled up. They put him in the car and took him to the hospital. He was in the hospital for 4 days, and at 7:30 on December the 14th, he died.
It wasn't just two men, it was two Klansmen.
And what we know
Right.
after this happened, it was two Klansmen who were part of the Silver Dollar Group. And this was the second Silver Dollar Group murder in Concordia Parish in '64.
Who was the first murder?
The first one was a young black man named Joseph Edwards, who was abducted on the Ferriday-Vidalia Highway and has not been seen since, but there's no doubt in anyone's mind that he was murdered.
They never found the body.
Never found the body.
As we talked to the daughter of Sonny Taylor, one of the Silver Dollar Groups, many times, has said, her daddy said, "We wrapped black people, or niggers is what they said, in barbed wire and threw them into bayous." So he may be down in some bayou and said we did the barbed wire because he wouldn't come up.
He could be like that. He could be inside the levee buried somewhere, because we know that Joseph Edwards.
Part of this Ferriday Freedom Riders movement?
No, Joseph Edwards, what happened with Joseph Edwards was he worked at the Shamrock Motel in Vidalia. And he was sort of a real friendly person. He knew a lot of people. And a white woman who worked as a clerk, registration clerk there at the Shamrock, alleged that Joseph Edwards had forced a kiss upon her. And it wasn't a few days after that that he was traveling on the Ferriday Highway, coming home in his car. Someone saw this white, unmarked police car with a red flashing light on the dash, pull him over. That's the last time anyone saw him in his car. His car sat on the side of the road for 2 weeks. His mother went from all over the place trying to find him. She even went to the jail. She couldn't find him. He's missing, hasn't been seen since. He has a sister in New Orleans who, just like you and me, wants to know where his body is. And Joseph Edwards is the only case I'm aware of from that area in which the body's never been found. And Frank Morris is the only case that I'm aware of from that era in which the victim lived long enough to physically describe his attackers.
Yes, Frank Morris lived 4 days in the hospital with 99% of his body burned, 100% of the body burned. But God gave him the ability to describe the two men. And you have tracked down, I think, and spoke with, since you started this journey with your book, starting on chronologizing the Silver Dollar Group, a man out of Alexandria, Louisiana, Spencer.
He was from
Rayville, up north, more north than here in Louisiana.
That's correct.
Spencer, tell us about him. He is now dead, I understand.
He died 2 years ago. He denied having any involvement in this, but what we were able to do from family members who said that over the years he had talked about having gone to Ferriday and burning down this shoe shop and not expecting anyone to be inside the shop. And
did Frank Morris live in this shop?
He occasionally lived in the back of the shop. He also owned a little building behind the shop where that night his grandson and one of his employees was working.
The building is gone
It's
now.
gone.
Also. It's
it
gone
was
too.
sitting right behind it there. And so...
Why would they expect him not to be here then? He would be here in that building.
Well, the thing of it is, he occasionally would stay somewhere else, maybe not necessarily here. But that's a good question. You know, why would they not think he was going to be here? They certainly knew he was here when he came up to the front window.
Why wouldn't we think they wanted to kill him and burn him up anyway?
I think they definitely wanted to set his building on fire. In my mind, I've always wondered why the man with the shotgun didn't shoot him.
Right. He wanted him to burn.
Well, it could be. We don't know.
I mean, he knew if you set the building on fire, I'm telling you, get back in there, nigger, or whatever the word he used. He knows he's going to burn to death in here.
It could also be this. Frank Morris had a run-in with a deputy here over a pair of cowboy boots. And this deputy, who was in the Silver Dollar Group, did not like anyone talking.
What was his name?
His name was Frank DeLauder.
Oh, okay.
And they had an argument over a pair of cowboy boots. And essentially what happened is Frank Morris had told Frank DeLauder that I'm not doing work for you for free anymore. DeLauder would just sort of order people to do whatever he wanted them to do. He was a deputy.
Deputy sheriff, okay.
So one day he stood up to him and said, I'm not doing it anymore. So the belief is that DeLauder wanted his business burned out for sure, as a lesson to the black community.
How dare you talk to me like
Don't talk to me like that.
I'm white, you're black.
That's right.
And you're going to do my shoes for me.
That's right. That's right.
So was DeLauder have a connection with Spencer out of Rayville? Has that been connected?
He was not connected to Spencer, but there was a man in the middle named Cooney Paso who was with DeLauder the night before the arson, and who the families of the man from Rayville connect Spencer to this middle man here. That they knew each other, and they were the two that came to the shop that night.
You know, it's so ironical. We're doing this is Black History Month, and we're doing this show in February. And I don't know if you saw, but about a week ago, a current Klans member was found dead in his car in Missouri. And he was he was one of the Knights, White Knights, or whatever they call them. Right. Yeah, one of the factions I read. It's only 8,000 Klansmen left. Only, but that's still too many. But back in the 1920s, it was over 4 million Klansmen in America. But now you have other names, skinheads and other names too that are still hate groups.
You will never ever, I don't believe, get rid of hate groups.
I don't either.
They'll always exist. We'll never see a Ku Klux Klan like we had in the 60s. I don't think communities will stand for it. No. Law enforcement agencies won't stand for it anymore. But we will always have these situations where violence pops up from these small, probably basically small groups of men. We'll never see these huge numbers again.
You know what I've seen, I agree with you definitely, Stanley, but what I have seen also, sometimes when I Google stuff, you'll see a lot of they have an organization called Daughters of the Klansmen. So you have women also who are invested in hate also. It's not just the men all the time. So there are some women who also have hate in their hearts too. Even doing these shows here, there were certain people we tried to get to come, and they said just leave the past the past. And I don't know if they just don't want to hear it anymore, that it caused them so much grief, or maybe they still have some of these mores and norms in their minds also. You just never know. But we know we've come a long way. We've come a long way in Ferriday as far as understanding people and, you know, black, white, loving people, whether it's just as friends and visiting people and working together. When people have better understanding, they realize we're all the same.
And one sign is this: me and you 50 years ago wouldn't be standing beside each other doing an interview like this. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. So Stanley, what is your goal now? You want to shine light on all Klan. You've done the Silver Dollar Group. You've found as many people as you can probably now, you think, right? 9 people, 1 white they killed also. They killed 9, 8 black and 1 white.
8 definitely. There's 9 murders that are covered. I know for sure 8 were Silver Dollar, and of those 8, 1 was a white man.
And Frank Morris is not included in that?
No, he is in that number 8. At number 8 on both sides of the river is how many we can directly attribute to the Silver Dollar Group. There may be more that we'll never know.
Because they were, and I will have to say this about the group, they were only 15 men, I think you said. Hardcore, and they broke away. Tell us the story of how they formed, Stan.
Well, the thing about the Klan, and it's kind of a picture of it today as well. The Klan sort of operates on 2 different things. It's always created them problems. One is that in traditional Klans, you always had a group in there that believed very much in violence, whereas the others may have been in there strictly because they didn't like black people, they didn't want integration, but you had this core group that always wanted to have violence. So that was always a problem in any Klan. The second deal was, when you see traditional Klans, you typically see them in their robes. They burn crosses, they have these big rallies, hoods. If you belonged to the Klan, you had to pay dues to be in it, a membership due, you had to pay for your robe. So what happened was, Klansmen, the leaders, would tend to enrich themselves off of their own memberships, and that would always be a constant of problems. And so these problems, the Silver Dollar Group guys thought that all of these crosses burning, wearing robes, they thought all of that was silly, ridiculous, a waste of time. They didn't want any sort of pats on the back for what they did. They were so deep into this belief that blacks were inferior and we would not have integration, that they basically just went underground from unknown clans, and they operated strictly within themselves. They were called a clan within a clan, and that's why they were so successful. That's why they got away from it.
I'm surprised they didn't grow bigger, but they probably didn't want to, because with size, you couldn't do the kinds of things they did. Right.
It's a terrorist cell, and they work best when there's very few, when there's only one leader, and when they do not communicate. Just like ISIS is on TV, the Silver Dollar Group wouldn't do that.
Right. They don't want
they don't want the publicity.
And that's how they didn't get caught. No Silver Dollar member was ever charged with one thing, were they?
No, they did end up, but it was later in federal court, because 2 crimes were committed on federal property. They were able to bring federal charges against them, but they were convicted right before they died. They spent all of their lives.
Was it of murder?
2 murders, yes.
Who were the Silver Dollar Group names that were convicted?
Over in Adams County, Mississippi, there was a black man murdered named Benchester White.
He's one of the 8 blacks.
He is one of the 8. One of the men that led this group, his name was Claude Fuller. Now, Fuller was never convicted, but 2 other men were with him. One of those 2 men, Ernest Avance, was still alive in the early 2000s. He was convicted. And then over in Franklin County, Mississippi, there were 2 black teens that were murdered in 1964. 2 Klansmen were arrested then, but it was not until 2007 that James Ford Seal was arrested in federal court and taken through the federal system. He was convicted. He died in prison in 2011.
How many years did he serve?
4 years for that.
For all the murders.
But he lived his whole life.
Right. And I talked to Deborah once. Her father never thought he had done anything wrong. Deborah Taylor, Sonny Taylor, do you think any of them ever had any regret for the life they had lived and the murders?
I am told that some of the Silver Dollar Group people that did not commit murders did at the end of their lives have regrets and express over and over that they were really sorry for what they had done.
It's like the Democratic governor, George Wallace, back in the day saying, you know, niggas, you're not coming into this school.
Absolutely.
At the end of his life, I understand he changed.
I'm
towards
told
black
he
people.
did.
The governor of Alabama back in, that was probably the 60s too. We're going to take a short break and come on back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White, and we're going to talk to one of the actual Ferriday Freedom Riders, a part of the Ferriday Freedom movement here in Ferriday, Louisiana. Come on back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White.
I am for the child who lives in motels, cars, and shelters, now in foster care, a group home, where he sleeps not on a bed, but on a temporary cot. He is the child I am for. I am a CASA volunteer. I am you.
Thanks for coming back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. As you see, we're still on hallowed ground here at the site of where Frank Morris basically was burned to a crisp and did live 4 days. God allowed him to tell what his people looked like who actually did, the Klansmen who actually did set his place on fire with him in it. I'm joined now by two people who were part of the Ferriday Freedom Movement. Really, they were the resistance, is what they call themselves, against the Klansmen. And a lot of this deaths that the Klansmen did, they wanted to retaliate, not retaliate, basically defend yourself, because Mr. David Watley, you've seen me before, is part of Deacons for Defense. And Miss Rose Lane is also part of what the Freedom Riders, kind of, you call yourself the Freedom Riders. Right. Tell us exactly what that was, the Freedom Riders in the 60s.
We would go through town and, you know, see what was going on and hear how people were being treated and all that. And then we would march.
It was pretty bad here in Ferriday.
It was real bad back then.
Vidalia, Ferriday, Natchez, all of northern Louisiana.
Right.
50s, 60s.
Right. But it really got bad in Ferriday.
Why so bad in Ferriday?
I don't know.
Was there more resistance from you all than there was in Harrisburg? More black people who joined together for Deacons for Defense, for the Freedom Riders? Do you think you fought back more?
I think it was. That was the problem.
That was a problem.
Problem. Big problem.
Too, there was more of the Klans people in this area.
With the Silver Dollar Group concentrated in this area, along with the other Klans. Now, I do have to say this. Earlier on the show, we had Stanley Nelson. He is on his way now to interview a Klansman who's 80 years old who wants to talk about things they did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He also, to show you how sacred and how spiritual this property is, while he was being interviewed by me and showing where Rosa Williams' grandfather, Mr. Frank Morris, was burned to death, she called him, not knowing that he was here, not knowing we were on these grounds. So that tells me that we're trying to do the right thing in Dianne Andrews in Black and White and shine a light on things that people need to know what happened. God is in the plan.
Yes, indeed.
That's right.
See, what's done in the dark will come to the light.
That's right, and that's what's happening now. And even Klansmen and Klansmen's daughters are telling what their parents did.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit more. We've talked to Mr. Wiley. We're going to talk to him on the next show at Ferriday High. So tell us some of your experiences in this area. I think you said there were more businesses
It
in
was
this
a lot
area
of, it was a lot of business down here. Like Haney Big House, Jane Watkins had a pressing shop, a little store over there. John Smith had a club.
And most of there was black and white businesses in this area.
Right.
So, and I know Frank Morris did service black and white people.
Right.
And I understand he used to take the shoes out to the white women so there would be no mistake out to the curb.
Right.
That they didn't come in with him a lot of times.
Right.
To make sure no one would get upset with him.
Right.
But then there were purportedly, I've talked to Stanley about this, but it's never been substantiated, purportedly that he had dated a white woman and that's why they were mad with him too. But it could, you had heard that too?
That's where I felt about it. I don't know.
But also he was friends with some of the Silver Dollar Group. It's a very complicated, convoluted story with poor Mr. Morris.
Right.
But he ended up a casualty. Tell us some other people that, did somebody get burned down the street? There was something called some hall or some store, a juke joint down the street.
Got burned.
From here?
Yeah, the Haney Big House, they burned it down.
And white people did that too. The Klan burned it down. With anybody in it? Did anybody die?
No.
But they just one night just set it on fire.
Yes, that's right.
And this was a
Middle of the
black-owned
night,
business.
they got it caught on fire.
Big, nice. What did they do at Haney's Big House?
Oh man, they had like
I just left the little museum up here, and they had names and stuff on the wall.
Delta Music Museum, yeah.
They got a picture of Haney, and
he was
they
a
had
black
the
man.
People, right. He had Bobby Bland and.
He used to bring them right down here.
Yeah, B.B. King.
Yeah.
Real blues people. That's why there's such a blues area here. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And they used to park the bus right down on the
Biggest thing
street.
in town.
And all this was built around.
Nice big building.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, we've shown a picture of Frank Morris's. This was a nice building he had for the
right.
60s.
A stone
And
building,
no
right.
white man had this. No
He
white man
his
had a
own
shoe shop but
business.
him.
That's all.
And he'd had it for 30 years, I read,
Right.
since he was in his 20s.
Oh, yeah.
I understand he could build a shoe. Did you know him?
Oh yeah.
And you knew him?
Personally,
she
yes,
used to
indeed.
sell
Come
have
out,
the jewelry, you know, and the people come try to buy earrings.
Oh, he had jewelry. He was
Yeah.
just an entrepreneur.
Right. And we would try to buy, you know, earrings from him.
Yeah.
But when the white men would start coming in, he says, okay, now y'all girls got to go. But by us being nosy, we'd walk so far over here, and we'd stand back and see what was going on.
What be going on? What would be
But I
going
don't
on
know,
with white people?
the white men come like, sometimes be like 4 or 5 of them coming in at one time. But
To
whatever,
bring shoes or just to talk?
I don't know, I guess it was
Looked
talking,
like just
talk.
I mean, because you know they were some affiliation with the silver dollar thing, and they all would go different places. I guess they were going as a group
Talking.
and to make their vision or their part known. This place was here. We had the China, what we call a Chinese store across the street here.
Chinese store back in the 60s. You had Chinese
right,
people
right.
living over there?
Yeah.
Right.
In Ferriday, Louisiana, in the
Right.
60s, you had Chinese people.
Right. Still got them here.
Yeah, I know now, you know, but I'm surprised. Now, did the Chinese people get along with the black people or white people, or were there problems?
They got along good with the black people.
They
So
had
the
no
white people
choice.
didn't like them either.
Yeah, they had no choice because that was their main source of income.
What did they have?
From the black.
A restaurant or what was it?
It was a store, a convenience store.
Okay.
Yeah, and meat market type of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was the only store down here, basically. So they treated the blacks the way they wanted to, and at that time they didn't have to go out of their way and anything. I was young at that time, and you'd go in there, and of course they was funky and stuff, but you could tell that wasn't what they wanted to do, the lifestyle they wanted. But they did it because of the situations and the times. And,
Now, what do you all think of desegregation? What you did at Ferriday High School, this area was more profitable, it seems like what you're telling me, 50 years ago than it is today. There are not as many businesses here today as there were.
Right, and up that way, you know, they had a few stores and stuff, and a couple of supermarkets and a couple of furniture places like on the front street.
Owned by black people and white people together.
But no, just whites.
Just whites.
Just whites. Down here you had your blacks, you know, and your black mostly consist of teenage clubs and stuff like that, you know, and like with Haney's and Big George
Haney's
Lounge.
Big House.
Big George Lounge and stuff like that.
Big George Lounge, that was a black one also.
Yeah, right.
Did they burn that one down also?
No, it may be still around at the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. But anyway, this is what the black folks did.
And black people worked in each other's, they bought from each other because we all lived around here. All the blacks lived around here. Now you've got white flight. White have lived, Stanley told me a lot of live out near the lake and different areas. So you lost a lot of businesses and a lot of money. And Ferriday shrunk in population also at Vidalia.
Yeah, what burns down stays down. They don't rebuild anything.
What do you all think was a good thing that has come out of, I don't call it integration, I did a show on that, it's really desegregation, because integration, again, a lot of whites moved to other areas, so you didn't really integrate.
Right.
Even at Ferriday High School, it's 87% black.
I think the biggest thing came from it was, as I explained to you on the federal court, is that we
Federal
gotta,
court, what were you there for?
to integrate the
Back then in the
school.
60s?
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was that I had the vision that they had all of the best equipment for the school.
When you
and
got
stuff
there,
like
did they?
that. They did.
They did. It was much better than the black school.
We got their old books
Yeah.
after they get torn
Do
up
you
or
think
whatever
now we
else.
should have gone, because we're going to start wrapping it up, but do you think we should have gone for separate but equal?
I don't think so. It wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have
It
happened?
wouldn't have happened. Like right now, they're saying turn everything
Come
back
on back
over.
to Dianne Andrews in black and white. We're going to talk about this in just a moment. Come on back to Dianne Andrews in black and white. Between black and white, there are always shades of gray. Thanks for coming back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. We're still out here on location, and I'm freezing if you see my nose is running, but hey, this is what you do. Miss Rosa wants to say some things about what you see, and I still want you all to, before, give me a brief moment or 30 seconds on, do you think separate but equal would have been better instead of desegregation? Okay. But tell me what you wanted to say, Rosa.
I would like to say this. I think the white people in Ferriday fear the black people. Now, today, and that's why they moved out on the lake and the country from around us. Okay?
Don't you think it may have just been some back to the separate but equal, so now a lot of it is separate?
Right. Yeah.
White people, it's 87% black in Ferriday.
Right.
So most white people are where? Out in the lakes and in other suburbs.
Right.
You still have a problem with that equal thing.
The equal thing.
But now,
It's separate, but it's
because
still not
right,
equal.
that's right. Because you look at the public school system now, and our money's being divided between vouchers and public.
Exactly.
So what do you think of separate but equal?
Well, I think it could be better had, because right now we're separate, but we're not equal, and a lot of it is because of our own doing.
Yeah, well, I was going to say a lot of politicians are black.
That's right.
A lot of school board members are black.
And they get
That's
it
right.
and
But they don't try to help us.
Well, I wouldn't say white is the next one, but they have the
But
same
in their thinking,
in the way they think.
actions.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking
And maybe that's just the way politicians do. It doesn't
They do.
matter what
Right.
complexion you are. I think
That's
it's
it.
a lot to do with
about. Yeah.
what they do.
That's right.
A lot of people start thinking about myself, me, myself, and I,
Yeah.
instead of the people.
Right.
So we're going to close this up with Dianne Andrews in Black and White and continue our search for truth and try to find some more Klan stories that Stanley and I are going to work on. And we have one more we're going to do here in Ferriday next week. So we'll see you then. Come on back to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. Between black and white, there are always shades of gray.